We're starting chapter 3 with this lesson, which focuses on graphing. We're going to plot points on a coordinate plane in this lesson, so we'll name and plot points in the coordinate plane. We'll graph a function, and then we'll graph a function represented by a table. First off, what is a coordinate plane? Well, the coordinate plane is formed by two number lines. We have the x-axis, which is in red here, and then the y-axis, which is in y. The x counts from left to right, the y counts from bottom to top. So as you get further down, it's negative. As you get further up, it's positive. Further to the left, it's negative on the x. Further to the right, it's positive on the x. Coordinates are listed in terms of x and then y. So you're going to see this ordered pair here, x and y. First, let's name and plot some points in the coordinate plane here. We want to give the coordinates and the quadrant of each point. So if we're going to start with M here, we're going to find the coordinates, which would be where is it on the x number line first, and then what is it on the y number line. Well, on the x number line, it's at -3. So we'll start with that, -3. And then on the y number line, it's +4. If we're going to find the quadrant, remember it's 1, 2, 3, 4, just like a C, so this would be quadrant 2. Now we have P. So on the x number line, that would be +2. On the y number line, that would be -3. So we're going to write it like this, -2 for x, -3 for y. And then if we're going to write this out for a quadrant, it would be 1, 2, 3. This would be quadrant 4. Moving on to the next ones. Now we need to actually plot these points out. So first we have -4 for x, +4 for y. So if I go to -4 and then +4, here's where this would be. Now I have 3 and -2. So +3 for x, -2 for y. I am off a little bit there. And then we have 0 for x and then 4 for y. So here's 0, the center for x, and then -4 for y. So that'd be plotting on that coordinate plane as well. Here we actually have to graph a function now. So it tells us to graph the function y equals 2x minus 1 with a domain of -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2, and then identify that range. We've done this before, and we know that domain is the input, or the x, so we put these in for the x's here, -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. And then this function is what we're doing to that input. So it looks like we're multiplying it times 2, then subtracting 1. Well, 2 times -2 would be -4, minus 1 would be -5. 2 times -1 would be -2, minus 1 would be -3. 2 times 0 is 0, minus 1 is -1. 1 times 2 is 2, minus 1 is +1. And then 2 times 2 is 4, minus 1 is +3. So if we're going to plot this out then, I would say input of -2, or x line -2, y -5. We have -1 for x and then -3 for y. When x is 0, y is -1. When x is 1, y is +1. And then when x is 2, y is +3. And here we see it follows a nice even line, so this one's actually pretty easy to predict. We can actually plot this one out. Let's actually use a real-world situation with the table. So in 1920, the ratification of the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution gave women the right to vote. The table shows the number to the nearest million of votes cast in the presidential elections both before and since women were able to vote. So first it asks us, is this a function? Remember the previous chapter we talked about that a little bit. Remember, functions can only have one output for each input. Well, I see only one kind of input for each one, so that'd be impossible to have multiple outputs. So this would be a function. Now we need to graph that table. We can't really count by ones here because we'd run out of room. So let's count by fours here. I'm going to pause it and write these in. All right, so I have all the numbers put in. So we see what these numbers mean. This means years before 1920. So if you take 12 years from 1920, that'd be 1908. 0 would actually represent 1920 then, and then these would be the years after 1920. And then here are the votes: 15 million, 15, 19, 27, 29, 37, and 40. And now we can graph this table out. So in 1908, or 12 years before 1920, we would have 15. We plot that point. Now we have at -8, we also have 15. At -4, we would have 19, so just under that 20. And then at 0 we'd have 27, so about mostly to that 30. See if I can actually make that show up. All right, then we'd have at positive 4 we would have 29, so just below that 30 again. Now we have at positive 8 we have 37, so quite a big jump here. And then at positive 12 we would have 40. So if you notice, it says that in 1920, this where 0 is, that's where women were allowed to vote. We see that big jump in voting, and that would make sense. You just doubled your voting population, so that number should increase, and it did.